What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is Shelf Appeal, the weekly show where I go over all the comic books I picked up this Wednesday, give you an impression as to what they're all about, and whether there's something you should go back to the comic book shop for. So make sure you subscribe to get one of these every Wednesday. Also, make sure you subscribe to be eligible for the giveaway. I'm going to be giving away a signed copy of Batman White Knight #1 with, by Sean Gordon Murphy, signed by Sean Gordon Murphy, so subscribe for that too. To start off with, we're going to be talking about Spider-Gwen #25. So Spider-Gwen #25, I grabbed the lenticular cover because I'm a sucker for these old Amazing Spider-Man covers, but this is really the story of Gwen Stacy taking out her aggression on pretty much anybody that she really needs to. Her first target being the Rhino. So she, after Alexi brutalizes her father, Captain, George Stacy, she goes after him and specifically hunts him down. And with the assistance of Matt Murdock's Kingpin of Crime in Earth 65, she ends up getting it, but it turns out that it's a setup. So, it's really interesting to see how this dynamic is going to play out, especially when you start including Frank Castle's Punisher into this, as well as a number of other villains. So I'm really interested to see how the Gwen arc plays out. Overall, I find it really interesting, and the stylized version of Robbie Rodriguez's art is always very appealing. It might not be for everybody, but it's something that I'm going to be following along with. The next comic I want to talk about deals in an alternate future, and that is Realm. So Realm #2 dropped, and this is a story about a magical, mystical land which used to be Earth. So essentially, this is 10 years aftermath of a portal or a tear in space-time, bringing this land of magic and monsters into the standard Earth structure. So like the USA has been overrun by all of these mythical, magical beings. So you've got like dragons and orcs and goblins and all this kind of stuff. It's pretty ridiculous. It really centers on the actions of one man, Will, as well as his kind of steady kind of sidekick or compadre, Rook, who is really an interesting character in this kind of fully encased mask with a very stone-cold persona. And what we see is he's taking on a new band of people that he's got to guide across the wasteland, and through these magical and mystical maladies that are going to be kind of cropping up at any point in term. So there's a hint that there's some sort of unexplained cargo that's going to cause some chaos later on down the road. So there's a lot of setup that's coming on in this. I really like it. Plus there's a mysterious character out there that just seems to be hunting orcs and goblins for fun, and I really want to know about him because he likes Steely Dan and I like Steely Dan. So let's learn more about that. I'm really excited for where Realm's going to be going. I'd recommend you guys check it out to see if it's something you're interested in. The next book I want to talk about is starting up a Marvel Legacy run, and that is Invincible Iron Man #593. So I grabbed the lenticular cover of that one. And what we see here is, well, it feels not necessarily great. I understand that there's a lot of setup that's going to be going along for this particular series, but what we see is the resurgence of the board of Stark, of Stark Industries, and how they're trying to kind of like push out his newfound mom, Mary Jane, who's being the administrator, Friday, who is his artificial intelligence, has been running the company, and overall you get this kind of like sense that that person is going to be an antagonist and possibly could be setting up a larger overarching villainous arc, but really what it comes down to is I found that there wasn't nearly enough development inside this issue to really bring me along. We got a really good moment between Victor Von Doom, his infamous Iron Man, and Ben Grimm, kind of like portraying who Victor Von Doom is at his core. So that was pretty interesting. But as far as the way that everything's going to be moving forward, we do end with this kind of like naked man pouring out of a pod, getting into some Iron Man armor, but he has no identifying features, no identifying marks on his face. You can't really identify him as Tony Stark or as somebody else. So you've got this kind of mystery that Brian Michael Bendis is setting about. It's not quite good enough for me to stick with it. That's the unfortunate thing about it. It just doesn't really grab my attention. It doesn't feel like something that I really need to follow along with, because right now we have 2 Iron People. So why do we need to know who this third man is? Until, I need it to be a little bit more substantial. I need some more substance to go along with this, versus just this kind of like dangling mystery, which doesn't really entice me that much. So I can't really recommend Invincible Iron Man. I was curious to see where it was going to go, and it just felt like more of the same, and more of the same didn't really help me buy the book. Another book I've been reading along with, though, is Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man #5. So in Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man #5, really long title, what we run into is a situation where we have Peter Parker trying to accommodate a lot of different things. First off, he's out there trying to defend the Mason from the Vulture, who was hired by the Tinkerer, who's the Mason's brother, and all this kind of intricacy stuff, and it really plays on that sibling rivalry that goes along, because we've got Teresa, his kind of not sister, that is really kind of messing everything up for Peter Parker and for Spider-Man. Spider-Man. We don't really see any kind of acknowledgments to the previous actions that are happening in Amazing Spider-Man, you know, the downfall of Parker Industries and all that kind of stuff. So it just feels like this might be taking place in the month in between, you know, because we did have a time jump for Peter Parker in the Amazing Spider-Man from when Parker Industries was kind of driven into the ground to where he's at with the Bobby Moore story. So let's assume it takes place in that kind of timeline. But it does set up a really interesting concept, which is a very Frost-Nixon kind of interview between J. Jonah Jameson and Spider-Man. The thing is that with the title and the end piece, where it says, "My Dinner with Jonah," that just really implies that it's going to be like, you know, it's going to be a very dialogue-heavy story or a very dialogue-heavy issue, and I'm kind of mixed on that. It's got to be really grabby, really interesting. It's got to delve a lot into the characters in order for it to be really interesting. So far, Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man, I really enjoyed it because I found it refreshing at the beginning, but it's starting to kind of like level off, and it's just like, okay, where do we go from here? So I'm really waiting to see where it goes from here. Otherwise, it's kind of like a hit or miss title. You might enjoy it, you might not. However, there is a book that I really enjoy and it's never changed, and that's Descender. So we've got Descender number 25, which shows more of the rise of the robots, which is the big culminating kind of plot point that's really been laid, the groundwork's been laid for since the beginning of this story. And with the rise of the robots, I mean, it's gorgeous as far as the art style is concerned. We get this intrinsic connection between Bandit and Tim 21. We get the scene we pick up with Tesla and Quan and Tim 22, and there's just so much going on. And then ultimately we have the connection that is finally made with what appears to be a harvester inside cyberspace that is kind of bandwidth throughout the entirety of the universe, because Tim 21 almost awakens, you know, at this point in time. So it just sets up so much cool stuff that could potentially happen inside Descender moving forward. So Descender number 25, really digging it. I can't recommend this independent title enough. Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen, they are just crushing it on this. It's soft, it's clean, it's got this very light and airy feel despite there's very heavy moments of violence, and you know, the darkness of space, it really kind of provides a cool contrast, and the story is just extremely strong. So it's definitely something that I recommend you guys go grab, you know, pick up the trades, pick up the issues, just enjoy Descender. It's a really great story. But while Descender's continuing on, we actually have a new story coming along, and in Superman number 33. So this begins the Imperious Lex storyline. So this is almost a direct continuation of Darkseid War, which was the finishing arc for Justice League at the end of the New 52. So what we see is we see the opening where essentially these members of the community of Apocalypse, with the foretold aspects that there will be no settling, there will be no control, there will be nothing but chaos until we actually see the rightful Iron Will, the Iron Hand, sit in the throne of Apocalypse and control it once again. And based on some of these imagery, based on some of these scenes, and based on what these characters themselves think, it's going to be Lex Luthor. However, Lex Luthor has been busy kind of earning the trust of Superman as well as the Metropolis citizens, kind of reforming himself and getting that kind of acceptance, the homegrown hero feel, born of this Earth to take care of this Earth. So it's really an achievement in his respect. However, Superman kind of portrays him as like a stage 4, stage 5 clinger, in that, he tries to, he's got Superman kind of like coming over all the time, or he calls Superman all the time to show off these new things, new toys, and how he's a better man and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of an odd portrayal there, but we do see that, Lex is essentially brought to Apocalypse by these two figures to take his rightful place, and then in an effort to save himself, he calls on this emergency protocol, which ends up capturing Superman, Lois, and Jonathan. So now we have, in separate sections of Apocalypse, we have each of those three characters that are going to be kind of making their way toward a portal or towards each other, so that way they can travel back home and get out of this kind of danger. So I'm excited to see where this goes. The first issue of this arc, really super slow burn. I'd almost call it even boring at this point in time, simply because there's a lot of other individual things. I do like that they took him to see, like, Fistful of Dollars, or, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, something along those lines. It's definitely, Blondie and Tuco, that is definitely a Clint Eastwood Western reference, so I really like them throwing that in there. Very, very cool little piece, but it's not enough to keep me, I wanted a little bit more substance. This is, it's like eating the salad before dinner. It's like, oh yeah, it's good, but I want the steak. Give me, a little less here in the sizzle. Give me the steak. I wanna like chew it up and really digest the story. So definitely a recommendation from me. Superman has always been a very strong book since the start of DC Rebirth, and I don't see why this story is going to be any different. However, it is a little bit slower starter than normal. If you also want to talk about a slow burn, we actually have Mighty Thor number 700. So Mighty Thor number 700 is the beginning of the end of the culmination of everything that Jason Aaron's really been doing on Thor since he's took over the title. So when I say that, this is really recapturing and encapsulating a lot of history relating to the Thor character, and it's telling it in very, in current space-time. So we see the Norns, the Guardians of the World Tree, Yggdrasil, and, the Thor, Odin's son is out there with his axe, and he's trying to take on all these different, these different villainous people of the army of Malekith as they try to take down the World Tree. So at this point in time, at least they have one, Thor that's trying to help them out and defend those kind of things. And then you wonder, where is Jane Foster's Thor? Well, she was in process of going to get one of her treatments, and then ultimately she gets called away to fight Jennifer Walters' Hulk, who's going to go on this chaotic rampage. And then we get some, Frog Thor, we get some historical Thor, we get some future King Thor, and we get, Galactus, holder of the Necro Sword, the Slayer of Worlds, and then Ego kind of gets it. There's so much going on. There's original art by Walt Simonson to open up the book. There's all kinds of amazing things about this. So as a 700 issue and trying to be an homage to all the history of Thor, it's a great spectacle for that. There are some plot points that move it forward. I'm going to get a little bit more into it in terms of an actual individual review for Mighty Thor number 700, so we'll go over it in a bit more detail, but if you were looking for a place to jump onto it, this is definitely a good spot, probably one of the better ones in recent memory. So definitely recommend you pick up Mighty Thor 700. It looks like it's going to be a pretty stellar ride. And speaking of rides, now that we're done with Wojar, the War of Jokes and Riddles, we actually get into the rules of engagement in Batman number 33. So this is telling the story of Batman, how he tries to earn, or the reactions of the people that are around him and his proposal to Selina Kyle, and the idea of him getting married to this villain as everybody sees it. So, we break down going into, the Bat Mansion. First off, in this one, you see an idea of him being isolated, him being under the radar, because they're traveling through a desert, and they insinuate that it could take another 14 to 15 hours for them to travel to where their location is, and they're doing it on horseback. And this is a man that's a billionaire that has bat planes and all kind of stuff. He could have them there like that. He could just have Cyborg boom tube him wherever he needs to go, and it'd be instantaneous. However, this is something that he can't alert his friends to, so he has to do this on his own. So he takes this kind of, this very sparse, isolationist kind of approach to this mission. And we run into some people from the, the Grayson comic book series, and then ultimately we find out that he has put in place some kind of defense mechanism around. I think it's not Kandahar. It's like Kazim or something along those lines. It's really easy to miss what the name of the city is. But we also get the reactions of the Bat family to this, or at least the current Bat family. We've got Jason Todd there, we've got Dick Grayson, we've got Damian Wayne, we've got Duke Thomas, and we've got Alfred breaking the news to them, and all the reactions are very different. You've got everybody in surprise. You've got Jason, who feels outraged that, he's shacking up with this villain. You've got Damian, who's crying because he knows the purpose of his father's trip to there, and that's to face Talia al Ghul, the mother of his son. So there's so much going on here. You've got probably one of the cutest renditions of Selina Kyle's Catwoman that I can remember in recent time, like where she's just looking up at the Guardian of the Desert before she kind of whoops him. You don't even see it on screen. There's no battle, there's no fight. It's just assumed that Selina Kyle is going to best this man. So it's just really kind of a fun romp through the desert in almost a literal sense that really is it's setting up where things are going to go. Tom King said that as soon as he started taking over Batman, his idea was to see Catwoman and Talia al Ghul fighting in the desert with swords. So that's what he wants to see, and that's what we're going to get, as implied by Talia al Ghul herself. So I'm really excited about Batman number 33 and where it's going to go. I've learned to expect very different things from Tom King's Batman compared to previous writers of Batman, and if I go into the story with the mindset that this is a Tom King kind of story for Batman, I'm much happier than trying to compare it or put other expectations from a different author onto this book. So Batman is continuing to be one of my favorite books. It's definitely a powerhouse amongst DC and something that I definitely recommend. I do want to say almost every single one of these stories is going to read better in trade simply because of pacing. So I recommend that you pick up the floppy issues if you want to keep up with the story currently, but don't be afraid to buy them in trade so that way you can get things at a little bit more healthy, a little bit faster digestion rate. Then we get into one of the brand new number ones, and that is Batman the Drowned number 1. So Batman the Drowned number 1 actually confirms a theory that I had when this one came out. And that was that this is going to take place on Earth -11. And if you aren't familiar with Earth 11 in the Multiversity storyline by Grant Morrison is a place where all of the roles are gender reversed. So instead of having Bruce Wayne, you have Bryce Wayne, and she is Batwoman. So by association, you also have things like Aquawoman, Superwoman, a female Flash, and then you have things like Wonder Man and stuff like that. And so what we see in The Drowned is we see the recounting of a story that Bryce Wayne is telling about the loss of a love, a loss of his great love, which is Sylvester Kyle. So the only thing that popped into my head was Sylvester the Cat from Looney Tunes, which kind of freaked me out a little bit. I'm like, this woman loves an animated cat, and it was, but really, what the distraction was the fantastic art by Philip Tan. So Batman the Drowned just kind of, I didn't really like. I wouldn't say that I didn't like the Dawnbreaker issue. I thought that there was some issues with the way that the story was being told, personally, and I felt that it was the weakest out of the three. And The Drowned definitely picks me back up to really feeling like these one-shots are on track, and I've only got greater expectations for where the Merciless and the Doomsday one are going to be coming. So like, I'm really excited about where they're going. The Drowned was very good. The visual spectacle of the art was fantastic. I'm going to do a more detailed review on the comic, so make sure that you check that out. It's going to go into a lot more detail on the storyline as well as the art. So definitely something I recommend. You guys should go back to the comic book shop and pick it up, so that way you can keep up with the dark metal mythos of DC right now. And then last but not least, we have another new #1 in the form of Sherlock Frankenstein and the Legion of Evil #1. So what this is actually a telling of Lucy's story before she made her way into this kind of rift, which houses all the heroes of Spiral City after their fight with the anti-god. So if you don't have any context for Black Hammer, you're probably going to be a little bit lost in this. But what you need to really understand is that in the world of Black Hammer was kind of this mythological figure that picked up the power of the hammer, and then all of a sudden he was kind of a cross between a new god and an Asgardian. He was like a Thor, but more. That rhymed. So he was. So this Thor, but more of Black Hammer. He was the leader, or he was the person that brought together all these heroes of Spiral City. They fought the anti-god, and then in the calamity that ensued, they were cast off into this parallel or pocket universe, this pocket dimension, where they've been trapped for many years, and they've kind of lost their will to escape and get out of there. So this is Lucy's story and how she actually made her way from the base Spiral City universe to this Black Hammer dystopian place where all of these heroes are trapped. And the first thing that she has to do is she has to track down one of the greatest villains in the history of Spiral City and of Black Hammer, and that's Sherlock Frankenstein. So Sherlock Frankenstein created or amassed a collection of supervillains, so she's going to be tracing her way as a reporter through all these various characters to find the information that she is looking for. And the first insinuation of this issue, Sherlock Frankenstein might be where the heroes are. So we're going to do a full review because you guys voted that that's the one that you wanted to see the most, so I'm really excited about doing that. So make sure that you check that one out to get a little bit more information on Sherlock Frankenstein and the Legion of Evil #1. But right now, I have to recommend it. Go back and read all the Black Hammer stuff. It's all awesome. And then, this is just going to get you right into that kind of vein where you can learn more about the villainous history, because Jeff Lemire is going to be expanding on this a lot. So those are the books that I picked up this Wednesday, but I want to know what you guys think too, so hit me up in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe to get in on the giveaway for Batman White Knight #1, signed by Sean Gordon Murphy. If you like what you see, hit the like button. Subscribe to get more of these every Wednesday, as well as a bunch of other different videos about comic books, comic book movies, comic book news, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.